The massive alien ships hung in Earth's sky like dark storm clouds that refused to move. Admiral Kim Soo stood on the bridge of humanity's last great warship, watching the enemy fleet through the wide windows. The ships were huge, each one the size of a city, and there were hundreds of them. "Sir, the alien message is coming through again," said Lieutenant Park Jin, her hands shaking as she worked at her control panel. Kim Soo nodded. He had heard the message many times already. The Vulcans had given Earth one simple choice: surrender. Completely, or watch every city burn. They had 24 hours to decide, and that time was up. The first alien attack came without warning. Bright beams of energy shot down from the ships like lightning, but these beams burned everything they touched. Seoul was hit first. Kim Soo watched in horror as the city where he had grown up disappeared in flames.
Oh.
The buildings melted like ice cream in the sun. "They're hitting New York now," reported Sergeant Kim Mean from his station. "London is next." The alien weapons were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They didn't just destroy buildings, they turned everything to ash. In seconds. The streets, the cars, even the concrete roads simply vanished under the burning light. All defense stations report heavy damage, called out Corporal Lee So. "We're losing contact with the orbital platforms." Kim Soo gripped the rail in front. Of him, Earth's defenses had been built over decades. The best minds in the world had designed them, but they were falling apart in minutes under the alien attack. "Sir, we're getting surrender messages from all the world governments," Park Jin said, her voice barely above a whisper. This was what the Vulcans expected. They had conquered 17 worlds before Earth. Every time it was the same story. The aliens would arrive, show their power, and the local species would give up. It was quick and efficient. "Transmit our surrender," Kim Soo ordered, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "All human military forces are to stand down immediately." Even as he gave the order, Kim Soo touched a small device hidden in his pocket. It was a communicator, but not the kind anyone would expect to find. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in tunnels and bunkers that didn't appear on any map, a very different message was being sent. Major Lee Hyo received the signal in an underground chamber 50 meters beneath Seoul. The room was filled with computers and screens, all of them showing the destruction happening above. But Lee Hyo wasn't watching the death of his city, he was watching the birth of something else. "Phase 1 is complete," he said into his headset. "All resistance cells report ready." Around the world, similar scenes were playing out. Bunkers beneath every major city, small groups of soldiers and civilians were receiving the same message. The surrender was real. Defeat was not. The Vulcans landed their occupation forces within hours. Their soldiers marched through empty streets, setting up control points and communication centers. They had done this many times before on other worlds. The routine was always the same. Commander Zethmel walked through the ruins of downtown Seoul, his armored boots crunching on broken glass. The humans had put up no real fight. Their weapons were primitive, their tactics simple. This had been one of the easiest conquests in Vulcan history. "The local population appears to be in hiding," reported one of his officers. "Standard behavior for a defeated species." Zethmil nodded. It would take a few weeks for the humans to accept their new reality. They always did eventually. Fear was a powerful teacher. What the Vulcans didn't know was that they were walking over a vast network of hidden tunnels and chambers. Every step they took was being recorded by hidden cameras. Every word they spoke was being analyzed by listening devices built into the very walls. "Captain," Park Da crouched in a tunnel beneath. The alien commander's feet, watching him through a tiny camera. She had been a teacher before the invasion, but now she was something else entirely. She was a hunter, and she was learning everything about her prey. "Look at how they move," she whispered to her team. "See the pattern? They check the same corners. Every time, they're predictable." The Vulcans thought they were managing a defeated population. In reality, they were being studied like insects under a microscope by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Above ground, the aliens went about their business with confidence. They had won just like they always did. Below ground, humanity was preparing for the real war to begin. The The surrender had been broadcast across the galaxy. Earth was defeated. The humans were broken. The Vulcans had achieved another quick victory. But in the darkness beneath the burned city, something else was stirring. The sleeping giant was not dead. It was simply waiting for the right moment to open its eyes. The first phase of humanity's greatest deception was complete. Soon the real war would begin. 3 months had passed since the Vulcans planted their flags in Earth's major cities. Commander Zethmil stood in his new office, built inside what used to be Sol's City Hall. Through the large windows, he could see his soldiers patrolling the quiet streets. Everything was going according to plan. "Weekly report, sir," said his aide, handing him a datapad. "Human population remains cooperative. No organized resistance detected. Weapon collection is 90% complete." The humans had handed over their guns, their explosives, even their kitchen knives without protest. Just like every other species the Vulcans had conquered. Fear made everyone reasonable in the end. What he didn't know was that 50 meters directly beneath his feet, Colonel Park Da was reading the same report. The Vulcans had excellent security systems, but they had never fought an enemy that lived underground. "They collected our old weapons," Park Da said quietly to her team. "The ones we wanted them to find." The resistance had spent 3 months in complete silence. Not a single attack, not even a protest. To the Vulcans, this proved that humanity was truly broken, but Park Da knew better. They weren't broken, they were learning. "Show me the patrol patterns again," she whispered to Sergeant Kim Min. Kim Min brought up a holographic display showing the streets above. Colored lines showed where Vulcan patrols walked every day. Red dots marked their guard posts. Blue squares showed their communication centers. "They checked the same 20 buildings every morning," Kim Min explained. "Always in the same order. Always at the same time." "And their armor?" Park Da asked. "Corporal Lee So has been analyzing the footage," Kim Min replied. "Found?" Lee So activated another display, showed a close-up view of a Vulcan soldier's armor, recorded through a hidden camera. "The joints are weak," she said, pointing to the gaps near the shoulders and knees. "And look at this. Their weapons overheat after 15 minutes of continuous fire." Park Da nodded. This was exactly the kind of information they needed. Vulcans thought they were managing a defeated population. In reality, they were being studied like lab animals by scientists, but all the time in the world. Similar scenes were playing out in hidden bunkers across the globe. In the tunnels beneath Tokyo, Major Kim Na was cataloging Vulcan sleep patterns. In the sewers under London, Captain Park Soo was mapping their supply lines. Every resistance cell was gathering intelligence, but none of them were acting on it. Yet the waiting was the hardest part. Every day, Park Da's team watched Vulcan soldiers walk through their city, knowing they could strike at any moment. But the orders were clear: observe, learn, prepare. Do not engage. "I found something interesting," said Private Lee Bo, looking up from his computer. "The Vulcans are using the same communication frequencies on every world they've conquered. I've been listening to their home-based transmissions." "What are they saying?" Park Da asked. "They're bored." Lebo replied with a small smile. "They keep complaining about how quiet Earth is. Apparently most species start fighting back within. The first month, they think we're too scared to resist." Park Da almost laughed. Too scared to resist. If only they knew what was really happening in the darkness beneath their feet. The Vulcans had made a critical mistake. They had studied human technology from the surface level, the weapons and vehicles they'd found during the initial invasion. What they hadn't realized was that humanity's real military assets had been hidden for decades, waiting for a threat that required their use. In a bunker beneath the ruins of Busan, automated factories were slowly coming online. These weren't the kind of factories that appeared on any government record. They had been built in secret, designed to produce weapons that officially didn't exist. "Production is at 15% capacity," reported Lieutenant Kim Woo-tu, his commander. "We should be at full capacity within 2 months." The weapons being produced weren't like anything in Earth's regular military. Plasma rifles that could cut through Vulcan armor like paper, cloaking devices that made humans invisible to alien sensors. Most importantly, Detailed intelligence packages on Vulcan biology and psychology, gathered through months of careful observation above ground, the Vulcans continued their routine. They had established a perfectly efficient occupation. Crime was down to zero because there were no criminals left to commit crimes. Rebellion was non-existent because there were no rebels left to rebel. Commander Zethmel filed his monthly report. With complete confidence, Earth was the most successful conquest in Vulcan history. The humans had been completely pacified without a single shot being fired in anger. But in the deep places of the Earth, something was stirring. The resistance wasn't just hiding anymore. They were transforming. Every human in the underground network was becoming something new. A hunter, a spy, a weapon of war. The silence was about to end. Soon the Vulcans would learn what happened when they mistook patience for weakness. They would discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the ability to wait, to watch, and to strike. When the enemy least expected it, the quiet phase was ending. The real war was about to begin. The first Vulcan patrol to disappear vanished on a Tuesday morning in the ruins of Busan. 12 soldiers had entered the destroyed shopping district for a routine inspection. They never came out. Commander Zethmel stared at the empty street. Through his binoculars, there were no bodies, no blood, no signs of a fight. The soldiers had simply vanished like smoke in the wind. Probably got lost in the rubble, suggested his aide. The humans destroyed most of the street signs when they retreated.
Oh.
Zethmel wanted to believe that. It was easier than thinking about other possibilities. The humans had been completely quiet for 3 months. They handed over their weapons, followed all the rules, and caused no trouble at all. But then a second patrol disappeared in the Amazon forest. Then a third in the ruins of Berlin. Each time, it was the same story. Soldiers went in, soldiers didn't come out. No trace of what had happened to them. Deep beneath Seoul, Major Park Yoon stood in front of a massive display screen showing Vulcan positions across the entire planet. Red dots marked every alien base, every patrol route, every communication center. The Resistance had been watching and mapping for 3 months. They knew exactly where every enemy was located. Automated factories report 25% capacity, said Lieutenant Kim Woo, reading from his control panel. Weapons production is ahead of schedule. Stealth systems are fully operational, added Corporal Lebo. We can move 50 teams. Without detection, Park Jun nodded. The waiting was over. Ancient protocols that had been written decades ago were finally being activated. Hidden systems that had slept beneath the earth were waking up. The Vulcans had made a terrible mistake. They had studied human technology from what they found on the surface, the guns and tanks and planes that any government would have. What they didn't know was that humanity's real weapons had been hidden away for generations. Waiting for the day when Earth faced a threat that required their use, Captain Lee. Sun moved through the underground tunnels beneath downtown Seoul like a ghost. Her team of 6 soldiers followed behind her, each one carrying weapons that didn't exist in any public record. The rifles in their hands could cut through Vulcan armor like it was made of paper. The suits they wore made them invisible to alien sensors. Target patrol is 3 minutes out, whispered Sergeant Park-do through the comm system. 12 soldiers. Standard formation. Lee Sun checked her weapon one more time. The plasma rifle hummed quietly in her hands, its power cells fully charged. Above them, a Vulcan patrol was walking through the empty streets, following the same route they had taken every day for 3 months. They had no idea that they were being hunted. Remember, we take them alive if possible, Lee Sun whispered to her team. Command wants to know more about their communication systems. The Vulcans had superior technology, but they had never fought on a world where every human child knew the layout of their neighborhood better than any invader. Every adult had access to weapons that made the aliens' advanced technology look like toys. The strike was swift and silent. Lee Sun's team emerged from hidden doorways and storm drains like shadows coming to life. The Vulcan patrol never had a chance to raise an alarm. Within 60 seconds, 12 alien soldiers were unconscious and bound with restraints that couldn't be broken. Clean sweep, Lee Sun reported.
Ow.
No casualties on our side. Moving to extraction point. Similar operations were happening across the globe. In Tokyo, Major Kim Na led raids that struck like lightning and vanished like mist. In London, Captain Park Soo turned the underground tunnels into a deadly maze where alien patrols entered but never emerged. The Resistance's true strength wasn't their hidden weapons. It was their willingness to turn their entire world into a weapon. Commander Zethmel stared at the casualty reports with growing alarm. In just 2 weeks they had lost more soldiers than in the conquest of the previous 5 worlds combined. The humans weren't just causing trouble, they were systematically destroying the occupation force. "Sir, we're getting strange reports from patrols across the planet," his aide said nervously. "Equipment failures, soldiers found unconscious. Weapon caches that simply vanish overnight." "Impossible," Zethmel growled. "The humans surrendered. They have no weapons, no organization, no leadership." But even as he spoke, he knew something was wrong. The humans had been too quiet, too cooperative. Real defeated populations didn't act like this. They complained, they protested, they caused problems. The humans had done none of these things. In the deep bunkers beneath the earth, ancient artificial intelligence systems were coming online. Computers that had been sleeping for decades were waking up, their quantum processors spinning up war. Protocols that had been written by the greatest military minds in human history. The sleeping giant wasn't just awakening. It was remembering how to be the apex predator it had always been. Above ground, Vulcan soldiers began to report strange phenomena. Shadows that moved when no one was there. Sounds that came from empty buildings. The feeling of being watched by invisible eyes. The prey had become the predators, and the hunt was just beginning. Captain Lee Sun crouched in the shadows of a collapsed building, watching the Vulcan patrol through her rifle scope. The alien soldiers moved down the street in their usual formation, checking the same corners they had checked every day for 4 months. They had no idea that death was watching them from a dozen different hiding spots. "Target acquired," whispered Sergeant Park Du through the comm system. 12 soldiers, moving according to pattern. Lee Sun smiled behind her mask. The Vulcans were so predictable. They always took the same route, always at the same time, always checking the same empty buildings. It was like they wanted to be hunted. "Team 2, are you in position?" she asked quietly. "Ready," came the voice of Corporal Kim Min. "We have the exit routes covered, Team 3. "All clear," replied Private Lee Bo. "No reinforcements detected." Lee Sun took a deep breath. This was what they had trained for during those long months underground. Every street corner, every broken window, every piece of rubble in this neighborhood was a weapon they could use. The Vulcans had superior technology. But they were fighting on humanity's home ground. Every human child knew these streets better than any alien invader ever could. Every adult had access to weapons that made the Vulcans' advanced armor look like paper. "Execute," Lee Sun whispered. The attack came from everywhere at once. Bolts shot out from hidden positions, slicing through Vulcan armor like hot knives through butter. The aliens tried to return fire, but their enemies were already moving, disappearing into doorways and alleys that only locals knew existed. "Contact! Contact!" screamed one of the Vulcan soldiers into his radio. "We're under attack in Sector 7. But his transmission was cut short as a stun bolt dropped him to the ground. Within 3 minutes, 12 alien soldiers lay unconscious. In the street, their weapons and equipment vanished into the urban maze that had become humanity's greatest weapon. "Clean sweep," Lee Sun reported, moving to Extraction Point Alpha. By the time Vulcan reinforcements arrived, the street was empty. Except for 12 sets of alien armor and some very confused radio chatter about ghosts and shadows. Similar scenes were playing out across the globe. In Tokyo, Major Kim Na led strikes that hit like lightning and vanished like smoke. Her teams would appear from subway tunnels, strike with deadly precision, and disappear back underground before the enemy could react. In London, Captain Park Soo had turned the old underground railway system into a death trap. Vulcan patrols would enter the tunnels to investigate reports of human activity. They would find empty stations and abandoned platforms. Then the lights would go out, and when they came back on, the patrol would be gone. The resistance fighters moved through their cities like ghosts. They knew every secret passage, every hidden door, every forgotten tunnel. The Vulcans were fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. Commander Zethmal stood in his command center, staring at a map covered in red X marks. Each X represented a patrol that had vanished, a supply convoy that had been hit, or a communication post that had gone silent. How many? He asked his aide. 237 soldiers missing in the past 3 weeks, came the nervous reply. Equipment losses are approaching critical levels. Zethmal felt a chill run down his spine.
Yes.
In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were hunting his soldiers like animals. What about the weapons we captured? He asked. That's the problem, sir. The humans aren't using the weapons we took from them. These are completely different. Our armor is useless against their plasma rifles.
Oh.
Our sensors can't detect their stealth suits. It's like they've been hiding their real military technology this entire time. The truth was starting to dawn on Zethmal. The surrender had been too easy. The humans had been too cooperative. They'd handed over their weapons without a fight, but those weapons had been decoys. The real arsenal had been hidden away, waiting for the right moment. In the tunnels beneath Seoul, Parkta studied footage of the latest operation. Her people had captured 3 more Vulcan soldiers, along with their communication equipment and tactical data. Every raid gave them more intelligence about the enemy. Look at this, said Kim Min, pointing to a screen. The Vulcans are changing their patrol routes. They're starting to avoid the areas where we've been most active. Good, Parkta replied. Fear makes them predictable in different ways. Now we know which areas they consider safe. Okay, the psychological warfare was just as important as the physical attacks. Every missing patrol, every vanished supply truck, every silent radio transmission made the Vulcans more nervous. They were starting to jump at shadows, to see enemies where none existed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Vulcans were learning what it meant to be prey. Above ground, alien soldiers began to report strange phenomena, movements in empty buildings that came from nowhere. The feeling of being watched by invisible eyes that never blinked. The real war had begun, and humanity was winning. Commander Zethmal stood in his command center, watching the emergency reports flood in from across the galaxy. It's the Vulcan High. Command had sent a massive reinforcement fleet to Earth. 67 of their most powerful warships were approaching the solar system at maximum speed. Sir, the reinforcement fleet will arrive in 6 hours, reported his aide, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. They're bringing enough firepower to turn this entire planet into space dust. Zethmal nodded grimly.
What?
The situation on Earth had become a disaster. In 3 months, he had lost over half his occupation force to an enemy that struck like ghosts and vanished like smoke. The High Command was not pleased. What he didn't know was that this moment had been planned from the very beginning, deep in the asteroid belt, far from Earth's blue skies. General Park Hoon stood in the command center of humanity's real military headquarters. The massive space station had been hidden among the rocks for decades. It's invisible to alien sensors and completely unknown to the public back on Earth. Reinforcement fleet confirmed, reported Admiral Kim Ju from her position at the tactical display. 67 vessels, just as our intelligence predicted. Orbital defense platforms report ready, added Colonel Lee Du. All kinetic bombardment systems are online and loaded. Park Hoon smiled. The trap was perfect. For 6 months, the Vulcans had believed they were fighting a desperate resistance movement on a conquered world. In reality, they had walked into the most elaborate deception in human history. The surrender had been fake. The defeat had been theater. Every burning city, every destroyed military base, every casualty report had been carefully planned to make the Vulcans believe Earth was helpless. Send the activation signal, Park Hoon ordered. It's time to show them what humanity is really capable of. Across the solar system, hidden defense platforms that had been disguised as space debris suddenly came to life. Weapons that had been sleeping for decades powered up with deadly purpose. Human warships that had been hiding in the shadows of moons and asteroids decloaked and revealed their true positions. The Vulcan reinforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find a broken world begging for mercy. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by the most sophisticated military force in the galaxy. "This is impossible," gasped the Vulcan fleet commander as his sensors detected hundreds of human ships where there should have been empty space. "Our intelligence report said their fleet was destroyed months ago." On Earth, the real revelation began. In every major city, massive blast doors hidden beneath the rubble suddenly opened. What the Vulcans had thought were destroyed military bases were actually camouflaged. Entrances to underground weapons facilities. Captain Lee's son stood on a platform that rose from what had appeared to be an empty crater in downtown Seoul. Around her, hundreds of similar platforms were emerging from the ground, each one carrying weapons that made Vulcan technology look like Stone Age tools. "All units, this is General Park Hoon," came the voice over the global communication system. "Operation Storm is now active. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity's home." The orbital bombardment began first. Tungsten rods the size of telephone poles dropped from space platforms, moving so fast they glowed white-hot. Each rod hit with the force of a nuclear weapon, but without the radiation. Vulcan command centers simply vanished, turned into smoking craters in milliseconds. Commander Zethmil watched in horror as his entire occupation force was destroyed in minutes. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were demonstrating military technology that was decades ahead of anything the Vulcans possessed. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet," his aide reported, his voice shaking. On the main screen, Admiral Kim Soo appeared. The man who had supposedly died during the initial invasion 6 months ago was very much alive, standing on the bridge of a warship that was larger and more advanced than anything in the Vulcan fleet. Commander Zethmel, Kim Soo said with a cold smile. "I believe you remember me. You thought I was dead. You thought Earth was defeated. You were wrong on both counts." "This is impossible," Zethmel whispered. "We destroyed your fleet. We conquered your world." "You destroyed the fleet we wanted you to destroy," Kim Soo replied. "You conquered the world we wanted you to conquer. Every step of this war has been planned by humanity's greatest military minds. You've been fighting a war we designed. For you to lose?" The truth was devastating. The Vulcans had never fought the real human military. They had been fighting a carefully orchestrated performance designed to make them commit their entire force to what they thought was a simple occupation. The real human fleet had been waiting in the outer solar system, studying Vulcan technology and tactics through months of careful observation. Every captured soldier had provided intelligence. Every intercepted communication had revealed secrets. "The storm isn't beginning," Kim Soo continued as human ships closed in on the Vulcan fleet from all directions. "It's been building for months, and now it breaks with the full fury of a species that has never known defeat because we've never fought a war we intended to lose. The galaxy would remember this day. The day a so-called primitive species taught the universe that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers, was superior strategy and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The storm had begun. It would not end until every Vulcan ship was space dust drifting in the void."